Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Thomas Varela. I'm with the Urban League of Philadelphia. I want to thank you for joining us this afternoon on behalf of the Make Black Count Coalition of Southeastern Pennsylvania. We're excited to have you here for the first in a series of workshops under the Make Black Count Coalition. Today, we are talking about the 2020 election, specifically preparing for the 2020 election. If you are not familiar, the Urban League of Philadelphia is 103 plus years old direct service civil rights organization. We are focused on 5 pillars: workforce and jobs, education, social action, which includes civic engagement, criminal justice, small business, health, and education. As a direct service organization, we provide services to help individuals and families move their way up the economic ladder. We're excited to be part of this coalition. This coalition is a first for this area. What we hope for this coalition to be is a community of organizations, nonprofit organizations, and other groups that are laser focused on increasing voter participation and census completion in the Philadelphia region. We recognize that there are several organizations in this area that are all doing great work, but if we can come together under this coalition, it allows us to show strength in numbers. And we're excited to have 2 organizations that are joining us for this first event. Before we turn it over to them, if you are interested in a coalition, feel free to reach out to me. I will make sure to put my email in the chat. If you're part of an organization, this is a nonpartisan endeavor. So we ask that if you're going to join this project, you are nonpartisan in the work that you do. We are looking for organizations that are Black-led or Black-facing. While we know that this information is valuable to everyone, we're laser focused on increasing the voting participation of African-American community. You do not necessarily need to be a 501c3. If you are part of a legit organization and it's a group of you all that just come together and you guys focus on this work, feel free to reach out. Don't feel that you have to have a 501c3 status to be part of this coalition. Once again, all we ask is that you are nonpartisan in nature. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Latifah Fields, who is the president of the National Coalition of 100 Black Women Incorporated, the Pennsylvania chapter, to provide greetings.
Thank you, Thomas. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, at whatever time you are watching this. For those of you that are live, it is afternoon here on the East Coast. Again, my name is Latifah Fields. I am the president of the National Coalition of 100 Black Women Incorporated, Pennsylvania chapter. The mission of the NC 100BW, as we coin it with our acronym, is to advocate on behalf of Black women and girls to promote leadership, development, and gender equity in the areas of health, economic empowerment, and education. We are currently comprised of 2,800 members nationwide with 61 chapters. The Pennsylvania chapter is the largest chapter, hailing with 147 members. Our work focuses primarily in the Philadelphia region. Through our national partnership with 100 Black Men of America, we are keeping it 100 and joining efforts with other organizations and coalitions like Make Black Count to ensure a complete and accurate 2020 census count happens on our watch. To learn more about the NC 100BWPA, you can visit us online at www.nc100bw-pa.org. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you very much, Latifah. At this time, we'll pass it on to Bruce Hill, president of the Rho chapter of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, to provide remarks.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Thomas. I am Robert Bruce Hill, Jr., and I am the president of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated Rho chapter, an alumni chapter serving the greater Philadelphia area. Alpha Phi Alpha is the first intercollegiate Black fraternity founded on December 4th, 1906 on the college campus of Cornell University. And one of our big pillars that we have, which we call our national program, is a voteless people is a hopeless people, where we go and we educate our communities on the importance of voting and also keeping them abreast of all of the various different issues that impact our everyday life and around our civics. But then we also advocate for voter participation. We do know African Americans are less likely to participate in, more specifically, Black men are less likely to participate in elections, just because we don't feel as though that, our voices are heard each time we go to cast our votes. So that's primarily one of our big focuses. And a myriad of number of different things that we focus on. One of our big focuses this year has been around with working on a complete count with the 2020 census and working with the Urban League, as well as the National Coalition of 100 Women, the Pennsylvania chapter. And then also just, making sure that our communities understand the importance of being civically engaged, because those resources and our active participation directly impacts our everyday life. And just not the presidential elections, but then also educating them on the local elections that have more of an impact on us every day. So we're happy and we're proud to be participating in these efforts and educating our community. Thank you, Thomas, and looking forward to a great discussion today.
Great, thank you very much. And as we stated, this is the start of our coalition work. If you are an organization that's interested in joining us, we invite you to join us. As we mentioned, the goal of the coalition is to support the work that organizations are already doing around census and voting, but to bring it all under one umbrella where it becomes a repository of events and resources for the greater Philadelphia community. And when we say greater Philadelphia, we're looking at the 5-county Philadelphia region. So once again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. At this time, we'll go into our feature presentation. We're excited to have both Lauren and Emma here to share their insight and perspective on the 2020 election. I know that many of you, and maybe all of us, with all the news, all the stories, lawsuits, there's so much that's happening in Pennsylvania. So we wanted to use this time to kind of level set and just take a step back, breathe a little bit, maybe do a 1, 2, 3 count, and just get the right information as it relates to what's the current landscape in Philadelphia region, what are strategies to ensure that we're prepared for this election, and how do we prepare our plan to exercise our vote on November 3rd. So at this time, I'll have both Lauren and Emma briefly introduce themselves, and then we'll go into the questions. So Lauren Christella from Committee of 70, if you could briefly introduce yourself.
Hi, I am the Chief Advancement Officer at the Committee of 70. I am also the President of the League of Women Voters of Philadelphia. So in my volunteer and my day job, I'm fully committed to helping people learn about the election and how to make their vote count in this year and in every year. Elections happen every year, and we want people to know how to make their voices heard. Our organization, the Committee of 70, is 116 years old. And we've been active in Philadelphia, and now our resources span the entire state. So we're happy to offer our election materials, and I'm sure we'll get into more of those resources as we continue. But thanks so much for having me.
Great, thank you. Emma Tramble from My Family Votes.
Hi, everybody. My name is Emma Tramble from My Family Votes. My Family Votes is what I call a grass seeds organization. So we are unpaid volunteers who have been active since 2008, and our focus is to strengthen the power of Black voters through shared information, but we actually have to insert a word, through shared credible information. And in my day job, I'm actually a consultant. I work nationally with nonprofits to help them do issues advocacy and voter engagement year-round.
Great. Thank you very much. Once again, thank you for taking time out your schedule to join us this afternoon. So, Lauren, as I mentioned, there's so much that's happening in the news cycle. It's hard to keep up, from lawsuits, from mail voting, from mail boxes being stolen. Can you kind of just give us a little debrief? Where are we at right now in 2020, August 26th at 12:14 p.m.? What is the current landscape in Philadelphia, in the Philadelphia region as it relates to voting?
I'm going to say cautiously optimistic. So we know what the problems are. We know where there are issues for concern, the mail delivery being one of them for sure. The lawsuit that the Trump campaign filed against Pennsylvania that was putting drop boxes into question. has been basically put on hold. So all of the counties I know are continuing to prepare their plans for drop boxes. We just might not know those exact locations for another few weeks. But know that there will be options to drop it off. We're just hoping that it's that there's a ton of options, not just a handful. So that said, the big piece of this, two things I would say. One, get your vote. If you're going to vote by mail, do it early. So take that issue of the mail and the postal service and whether it's funded or not off the table. Request your ballot today. Return it the day after you get it. That would be my advice to circumvent all of the issues around that. And then you should have every reason to believe that your vote will be counted if you get it in time. There's no reason to question that at this point.
Okay.
Right. The other piece I would say is to just be mindful of different attempts to make your vote not count, right? So check your registration, be vigilant. If you do these basic steps to inform yourself and your community, we try to make that as easy as possible at 70, and I'm sure Emma will have good resources too. You should have no reason to think that your vote won't count in 2020.
Great, great. And Emma, as you are internalizing this information, as you are communicating with the community, how do you communicate where we're currently at in this landscape?
Well, there are two big things in what I've noticed from predominantly Black voters, but it's kind of almost across the board, is a lot of people are panicking. And that makes people forget that they have options. So as Lauren said, like vote by mail is a really powerful tool. And I don't think people understand how powerful it actually is, because it allows you to vote early. And that's where some of the panic from people who don't want to vote by mail, because the state is going to start mailing, since this lawsuit is kind of resolved, probably mid-September, they're going to start mailing ballots out. So those people that get ballots, maybe the third or the fourth week in September, can actually be done in September. So the other thing is that you can track your ballot all the way from when you apply to when you're voted, when you've actually voted. And the thing is that, yes, they will send you emails and everything, but there is a website, and all you have to do is put in your information and your birthday, and it'll tell you exactly where your ballot is at all times. And I think that's the big panic around mail-in voting. And like Lauren said, we have to be prepared to do everything earlier, not just because of the post office issues, but because we are in a pandemic. A lot of the county offices, they're the ones that process all your voting information. They're running either on a smaller staff, or they're like secluded in a building, and they don't interact with the public the way they normally do. So the services are reduced. So we have to behave differently for this election. We know there's going to be a big influx, but we just all have to behave differently. Like, we just need a whole lot of extra time.
Great, great. No, definitely. I think the timing piece is important, just being able to gather the information as early as possible. It gives folks, especially those that are 100% sure which way they want to go in terms of voting, gives them the peace of mind to being able to exercise their right, and then exercise it from the comfort of their home. But then that piece of tracking is pretty key in terms of knowing that you can follow the process, almost like Santa Claus being able to follow the Santa Claus tracker during Christmas time. Lauren, you mentioned a bit around the lawsuit, and you said that at the moment it appears to be on hold. From your sense, do you have a sense if this is a closed case? Is there a potential that this lawsuit is still looming? Or, talk us through a little bit about what this lawsuit means and how we should internalize it.
Sure. So caveat, I am not a lawyer and I'm not very good at predicting things, but I think as of right now, it's on hold. The Trump campaign was asked to submit other cases to support the claims that they were making in the suit about fraud and other concerns, and they weren't able to do that. And the court hasn't dismissed the case, though, so it's still there. I just don't know that it's that big of a threat, but right now we're in a holding pattern.
Okay, great. Emma, when we look at particularly the African American community and some of the disinformation, misinformation, fake news, whatever terminology that we can think about in terms of just all the noise here, what are resources or what are strategies that you suggest in terms of helping African Americans kind of wade through all this information so that they know that they're gathering the right information?
Well, My Family Votes has a pretty robust website, and we actually partner with different groups or with the city's commissioner's office to verify our information. And we do link to Committee of 70 when they have their ballot ready, so people can actually they have an app where you just put your address in, and then you basically choose who you're going to vote for, and they show you pictures and have some candidate information. But one thing that I'm really concerned about, so it's myfamilyvotes.com. I'm going to be very clear about our website. And we're very active on Facebook, and we actually are running a Facebook ad. Now, we don't have much money, so we spent $50, but we've had over 1,000 engagements, and it's been running for about 4 days. So an engagement is if somebody shared or clicked on it, like went through our website. So it's talking about just vote early, vote safely, vote securely. And one of the big issues is that people are concerned not just about vote by mail, but they're also concerned about voting in person. So there's a lot of misinformation floating around on social media. And there's one that like people are starting to tag us so we can see it. So you need to find sources, organizations, or maybe you have someone in your network who is a voting specialist who actually knows the law. And that is where you should get your source, have them vet information there. There's one piece that's floating around. I just want to kind of draw people's attention to it. It has a blue background, and it's telling people, if you do vote by mail, don't mail it. Take it to your local Board of Elections office. So right now, the local Board of Elections in Philly, we're our own county. So our Board of Elections where you would turn in your vote by mail form is room 142. City Hall, those offices are not open to the public. So this little meme that's running around saying, hey, just hold it and take it to city, to basically for Philly would be City Hall. That is actually a voter suppression tactic. Because if you get your mail-in ballot in September and you mail it back, the mail is slow, it's not stopped. Because I think everyone on this Zoom session is getting their bills, that's for sure. So the people who are not worried about the mail are the gas company, the electric company, and everybody else who's sending you a bill. So it's slow. That's a big thing. So, we're a source. We do link to other credible sources. We keep everything consistent. And we do have a website because we know some people are not on Facebook. But people do come up on our Facebook page and ask us questions. And if we don't know, we go right to the Board of Elections. And sometimes we actually contact Committee of 70. So they are a wonderful partner, a wonderful source of credible information. So they are another one. So it's 70.org. I know Lauren will plug her own information. Also, the League of Women Voters, that's another organization that has great voter guides, and they're all 501c3 friendly. So we are an independent group. We don't have to be 501c3 friendly, but we want to reach as many people as possible, and we want to partner with groups that are not partisan, but who just care about people voting. So we maintain 501c3 rules, so that's nonprofit rules, so that we can stay impartial and focus on issues.
Great. Lauren, I have a two-part question. One question is a follow-up based on one of the comments that I saw in the chat. To those that are participating and those on Facebook, continue to make comments or pose your questions in the chat. We'll make sure to monitor them and ask them towards the end. But one question Sergio brought up was, while the Republican on a federal level have filed a potential lawsuit, there is also the state level Republicans that are filing a lawsuit. Does that have a certain level of meat at the same level that the Trump campaign has? Is that also something that we have to monitor? Not only something that's happened on a federal level, but also on a state or a local level?
Yeah, I think that was referring to a piece of legislation that the
Okay.
Republicans are introducing. We have a Democrat governor, and I doubt that he would sign anything, and I don't think they have a veto-proof majority to support that legislation, so that doesn't concern me as much, but I think it is an indication of where they are and the limits to legislative solutions to some of the problems that we're facing. So I wouldn't expect too much out of Harrisburg on that front. But I wouldn't be necessarily concerned about that at this moment. I just wanted to also pick up on something Emma said about fake news and making sure that you're well informed. We've got some really good resources on our wevote.70.org website that helps you choose your news wisely. That's one of the 5 habits of highly effective citizenship. And there's some really cool tools like NewsGuard, which you can download, and so that every website you look at, or if you do a search or you're on Facebook, you'll see a little medallion as to whether or not that's a credible source. And it helps you at a glance kind of separate fact from fiction or things you should be suspect of. I also wanted to point out that the office there's 2 election offices in Philadelphia, and the one at Delaware and Spring Garden is open and accessible. So if people are insistent on handing in their ballots in person, they can drop them off there when the time comes. We're hopeful that there will be more voting centers across Philadelphia too. But I think that's an excellent point, that people need to take their time with their vote. Cross off, you can't make a mistake and cross it off and fill in something else. You'll invalidate your own vote. So you have to be mindful, make sure you're using all the right envelopes and signing where you're supposed to sign. And that's the kind of information that you really want to be sharing with your community to make sure that people take their time and don't get tripped up by the new voting system that a lot of people will be using this time.
Great. And my second question, you actually started to tap into that a bit. Could you provide a little more context as to the We Vote campaign, which is the latest from Committee of 70? What does that look like? How can organizations, companies get involved?
Sure. I think this is the kind of ethos behind this program is something that Emma embraces too. It's that when we act as a community, we can make change, right? So we're promoting a culture of voting by working with all kinds of different groups, businesses, civic organizations, religious institutions, schools, to make it as easy as humanly possible to get all of the information they need to vote in the 2020 election. We take care of all the deadline reminders, we give you the credible sources, and you send it out to your community so that they're informed and they know that they're not tripped up by any kind of voting, or they're not tripped up in the process. Another piece of this is also really encouraging poll worker recruitment. We're going to see a huge poll worker shortage in the fall. To avoid long lines and chaos that lead to voter disenfranchisement, we really need well-staffed, well-trained poll workers. So I would encourage anyone listening, if you're comfortable with that, given the pandemic, if you're in a demographic that you feel like you are prepared for that risk, that we would strongly encourage you to sign up. There's links on our website, and we can make sure that you get the training and resources you need to be successful in that role too.
Great, thank you. We're gonna shift slightly to look into strategies, particularly as it relates to voting in person or voting in by mail. So Emma, what strategies do you suggest individuals take if they plan to vote in person? I know we saw former First Lady Michelle Obama talked about packing a lunch. Should individuals just assume that it's going to be a long line and they should just be prepared if they're going to vote in person? that they're just going to be there for a while? What are other things that individuals should do if their plan is to vote in person?
Well, one of the things about voting in person is that we have new voting machines, and so they came out in 2018 or 19, I can't remember. It's like all the years are kind of like gelling together. But anyone who hasn't voted since 2016, and there are a lot of people who only vote for presidential, this will be their first time seeing those machines. So you can expect some delay when in precincts, or we call them divisions, where there are people who have not seen those machines before. So probably the poll workers will be spending time kind of teaching them how to do that. The other thing is what I saw during the last election was when they did that poll consolidation, so they reduced it down to, I don't know, 191 or 192 from 800 and something polls, was that a lot of people don't know what ward and division they live in. And that's really critical because that determines, it's all based on your address, and that determines where you go vote. And the one thing I do want to emphasize is I love votespa.com because it's accessible to everyone, but it's just like the state's general site. But once you put in any information in there, any application, it goes to your county. So Philadelphia County will be processing whether they'll do a yay or nay, or whether you're going to get your ballot, or if there's an issue with your voter registration. So I would stress that people go to philadelphiavotes.com. There's a link on our website about that. But that is the Philadelphia Commissioner's Office. That's their official website. And so the commissioners are three elected officials. It's an interesting way that one of them gets elected, but we don't want to get into the weeds on that. But they are elected officials who run the elections. And so that's their job. And so if there's any kind of news about drop boxes, about office openings, so Lauren has information about Delaware Avenue, and I did talk to the supervisor of elections yesterday, and they said the offices weren't available. So they know in their pipeline that, and that's why we all have to stay in contact with each other. So yeah, it's nice to have comfortable shoes, take some water, take wipes and all that kind of thing, but know your ward and division, because if you show up at the wrong polling place and you say, I live in the 46th Ward 8th Division, they can say, oh no, you're across the park. That's where you're supposed to go vote. So it'll be much easier, but PhiladelphiaVotes.com has an easy app where you just put in your address and it'll tell you where your polling place is. So that's, if you go to PhiladelphiaVotes.com, you will be able to get like Philadelphia specific information. If and when we have drop boxes, they'll have locations. If they're pop-up locations, like Committee of 70 did pop-up locations right before the election. That was all, that information was circulating on that site. So sometimes, like with this election, stuff is probably going to cycle very fast. I mean, some of us were up at midnight exchanging emails about, oh my goodness, what's happening because we're under curfew. So that's the main thing, is know your ward and division.
And certainly to build off of that, that the polling places, even if it's been your same polling place for 30 years, because of the pandemic, you know, some senior living facilities, fire stations, things like that are not going to be polling stations anymore. So those locations might switch. So even if you think, you know exactly where you're supposed to go, I would definitely recommend doing as Emma said and checking on that PhiladelphiaVotes.com website to make sure, even in, you know, in the couple days before the election, so that you know exactly the right place to go.
Great, great. Laura, I'm going to come to you in terms of strategies for folks that plan to vote by mail. I know Committee of 70 played an active role with the drop boxes and just encouraging folks to vote during the primary. Are there things that people need to think about in terms of voting by mail? Like, you know, this is a new process for some. They may be filling the application wrong. They may not seal the right envelope. Are you able to just give some insight in terms of how do we ensure that folks that their mail-in ballot is valid and counted?
Sure. So a few things to note. One, we're going to be doing a bunch of similar programs like this one in the run up to the election after people have those ballots in their hand, more than likely, end of September, early October, to help people walk through that process, the little tips and tricks and reminders. We also do them on demand for organizations and groups and communities. You can find the form to sign up. If you want me to come speak virtually to your group, I'm happy to answer every single question and walk people through that entire process of applying to vote by mail and then also filling out that ballot. So some tips and tricks, I would say blue or black ink only, no glitter pen, no red pen. Like I said before, be super mindful. So no distractions, work your way through the ballot, turn it over, it's two-sided. You can use the Build Your Own Ballot tool that Emma had mentioned on 70's website, and that's for statewide. Anybody who lives in Pennsylvania can use that resource. And you can learn about the candidates and the offices, because this is, ultimately it's like a job interview. So you want to know what the job is you're hiring people for. And make sure you put your envelope in, you're going to get 2 envelopes to send things back in, the ballot back in. The secrecy envelope has no information. That's where your ballot goes. You put that in the larger envelope that has a ton of writing all over it. Make sure you sign and seal that envelope. Again, being super conscientious about how you're doing that, because if it looks like if you have to reopen it, if the seal is damaged, your ballot's going to get called into question, and you want to minimize the chance of that happening as much as humanly possible. There's a few other things I'd be happy to go in greater detail. But when I think it's helpful when people have the ballots in their hands so that they can really see all the pieces and walk through it and ask questions. So again, I'm totally happy to come back or have people sign up for individual briefing election questions.
I guess maybe a follow-up question. Emma, before we go to you, do you happen to know, I know you're not a lawyer, if we were to host like a Zoom where everyone had their ballot in the comfort of their home and we like filled it out together, is that something that technically is allowed, or does that break some type of election law in terms of that?
They're of their own free will, and they're filling out exactly what, they're the one holding the pen and filling out the ballot. So that's totally fine.
Okay.
Telling people how to vote, and if they're, limited capacity or something like that, I can see where that would be an issue. But if something like this, where you're just walking people through the steps as they have the ballot in front of them, is perfectly legal.
Okay, interesting. Maybe a follow-up event.
They have to return their own ballots, though.
They do have to return their own ballots.
You
Okay.
can go and pick them all up or something, or drop them all off.
Okay. Emma, I saw you had your hand raised. You wanted to add something?
I just actually wanted to revisit real quick about I saw something in the chat. So should I just hold off if I saw something in the chat about the polling locations, because you asked me about it?
Okay, feel free. Did you want to chime in on it?
Yeah, I just wanted to tell you, when you go to the poll, there are these big pink posters with who's on the ballot. And at the very top, I don't remember it's left or right, it has the ward and division. So it is posted. Somebody did say, how do you know? I wish somebody would tell us. But if you see that big pink poster, look up it, and then it'll have the ward and division. I don't really have a lot to add about the mail-in ballots. I thought about Lauren covered that well. We are going to have a video as soon as the ballots are available. We're big on making videos, so we do have a video on how to find your polling place. We have to update it for this election, but we did it for the last election. So we're very big on visuals. So we have, a lot of information about like what you shouldn't do, and we have an FAQ page that has all the details about who should be handling your ballot, that you have to do a form and sign between 2 people, those kind of things. So we do have to be mindful. There are people who are helpful in our communities who go to multiple seniors' homes and collect their ballots. That is not legal. There is a form, but if somebody comes in with 35 forms, I think, the Board of Elections would take issue with that. But if it's your trusted neighbor or you're a relative and they're helping you, that is legal. But what's called ballot harvesting, I think Lauren touched on it, is something that actually is a criminal act where people collect multiple, and you don't really know what happens with your ballot in that case. You may think that they're going to do a good thing and deliver it to the Board of Elections or put it in the mailbox, or hopefully if we have drop boxes, but you don't know. So you need to make sure that you only give your ballot to people you trust and that you both sign what's called a designation form.
That's a good point, because I know I believe that's some of the impetus to some of the lawsuits and some of those kind of pushback in terms of elected officials that talk about voter fraud. They tend to make reference to those types of examples where ballots are harvested. So thank you for making that point. So we're going to take a oh, sorry, Lauren, you was going to add?
I was just gonna say that's where that ballot tracker comes in handy, because that system is one of those steps, security steps, to prevent that from happening. So when you even if you hand it to the mail, right? If you give it to your postman or you drop it in a mailbox, you want to track to make sure it's getting where it's supposed to get. It didn't get lost, all of that. And that tool is really important, and your way to check that everything's working and your vote's safe. Because you can contact, like if it's 2 weeks and they don't receive your ballot, you can contact the Board of Elections and they'll void that ballot and send you a new one.
Great, great. And once again, for those that are watching us via Facebook Live, please, if you have questions, post it in the chat, in the comment section. We'll make sure to reference. And also in the chat, we do see your comments and we'll be getting to them shortly. We have probably 1 or 2 more questions, and then we'll go to the questions from the from the attendees. So shifting gears a bit, we talked a little bit now about the ballot and understanding, researching candidates. I know, Lauren, you mentioned on the Committee of 70 page, you guys have the Ballotpedia. Could you give us a little more insight as to that tool? What is its purpose? And I guess to a broader question, what are some of the questions that individuals should be asking themselves when they're trying to assess these candidates, whether it's simply looking at the presidential and looking at the 2 figures, or the other candidates as well? So not to be limited just simply Democrat and Republican, but then also down ballot, how do they kind of internalize all the different candidates that they may see on their ballot box,
Yep.
on their form?
So our Build Your Own Ballot tool is really helpful in walking you through. It gives you an explainer about what the office is. You can click on either of the candidates. We survey all of the candidates and their responses are posted verbatim. So to help you make that decision, to know whether or not this person shares your values and your priorities. We also link to their social media and their campaign pages for you to do a deeper dive. If it's not immediately apparent and you want to learn more, there's an opportunity to do that. And as you're going through, you can save your picks so that at the end, you can either email it to yourself, email it to your friends and family, post to social media if you're comfortable doing that. But when you have your ballot, whether it's in the polling place or with your vote by mail ballot, you can sit down and have your picks saved. We also ask each candidate for their top 5 endorsements. So a lot of time that's an indication of support that they're getting from, if they've been vetted by unions or newspapers or different groups, you can kind of quickly see that's an indication of their values and priorities too.
Great, great. Emma, a similar question, but looking at it particularly when we think about the African-American community, what are things that you're hearing, or when people come to you and say, who do I vote for? I know you're nonpartisan, but what are some of the conversations that you're having with individuals to help them figure out who to vote for, and who's going to be the best to serve the African-American community?
Right. Well, one of the things that some people are talking about, that they're going to sit out the election, who would normally vote. And, I talk to tons of, fortunately for work, and my poor friends, they're almost always like a focus group for me when I'm asking questions about how they're going to vote, is that people in general, not just in the African-American community, have to look at voting differently. I think that we're used to voting being kind of like a transactional thing, that we go to the poll, we vote, we expect something in those 2 to 4 years that you're in office, and then we come back and vote again. And what's happening is it's very difficult for us to keep people accountable when we just kind of hire them, let them do whatever, and then we come back and kind of rehire. So the voting process is really a hiring process, and we are the hiring managers. So that's the way I look at it. And the number one thing that a hiring manager looks for is, how do you solve problems? So when I tell people, I suggest that what they think about is, what issues matter to you the most? Like for me, I'm a small business owner. I have healthcare through the Affordable Healthcare Act, right? I cannot afford for my healthcare to go away. So that is a critical issue for me. For other people, it may be jobs, it's the economy, but one thing people don't think about is the court system. Because a lot of the policies that we love, we don't like, they move through the federal court system. So right now there's an eviction like stay in Pennsylvania, and there's a piece of it that's moving through the federal courts. And so a lot of people don't understand that all the things that the federal courts hear are not just, you know, these big national cases. So we're looking at federal judges on multiple levels, not just the Supreme Court. And like there was a case that moved through about Black women and their hair in the workplace. And could have someone fire you because you wear locks or twists? And the Supreme Court was like, well, you know, we're gonna leave that up to employers, which means you're vulnerable if your employer just decides, you know, you don't like the way you wear your hair, Emma, you're out. And I will have no legal recourse. So these are all the things you care about: healthcare, housing. They're gonna move through the courts. And if the courts move toward a more they're conservative now, but there are a few judges who will probably be retiring in the next year or so, and it may move all the way to the right, which means everything, like, especially if you're a progressive activist and you want something moved in the next 50 years, you need to pay attention to this election. So it's not just about the people. The people are the instruments, right? They work for us and they move what we want. So people have a lot more power. That, you know, billions of dollars are spent to influence your vote. It's not just, you're not just this, you know, passive person in the system. You're very powerful, and your power starts when you cast that ballot.
Great, great. And definitely want to say shout out to the Crown Act. I know the National Coalition of 100 Black Women have played a role. I have a personal colleague, Adjoa, who's in DC, that I know was very instrumental in that work. So definitely the Crown Act is something that motivated a lot of folks when we think about discrimination on the workforce. We're going to shift into questions from the audience. I did see these are kind of similar, so I'm going to kind of combine them. Let me pull them up. I see Darlene and Lauren, I'm going to direct this to you. Darlene asked, how often will the ballot, if we do have the drop boxes, how often are the ballots picked up from those drop boxes? And then Linda asked, are these drop boxes safe? Do we have to be concerned about tampering? Do we have to be concerned about ballots being put on fire or things like that?
Mm-hmm. So in the primary, they repurposed some mailboxes. So the same precautions that they applied to the mail that would apply there. Official ballot boxes that we're hoping the city gets are even more kind of, I don't want to say bomb-proof, but basically bomb-proof. It's harder to tamper with them. All of the ballot boxes, the drop boxes, would be under 24-hour video surveillance. And collection times would be dictated by the commissioners, but I don't know this for sure, so I would have to check it. But the last time I heard them speak about it, it was at least daily, if not multiple times a day, depending on how popular the sites would be. So I wouldn't be concerned about that necessarily. If you look at drop boxes that they're using in other states, the slots are very thin so that you can only put one ballot at a time basically in. So if anyone tried to stuff in 50 or 60, you would notice it would be on camera. It would take them a lot of time to do that. People have been doing this, like Oregon and Colorado and other places have been doing this for years and years and years and have really perfected the system. And we're really fortunate in Pennsylvania to be benefiting from a lot of their expertise and consultation.
Okay, great, great. There was a question. In terms of, Emma, I'll direct this to you. In terms of voter intimidation, I know there was thoughts of I know that there's work right now in terms of like encouraging volunteers to work as poll workers or to work as election officials. Should individuals feel that there may be the potential of voter intimidation happening in the polls? I know that there's been reports of folks indicating that people will be hired to kind of sway people one way or another as it relates to this election. Like, how do you help people kind of think through that?
Right. So the one thing is, I've been a poll watcher before. There are laws about who's in the poll. It's just really outside of the poll within, I think it's like 15 feet or something. No one can actually try to influence you and give you like those ballots. But the one thing to really inoculate yourself is to have your ballot ready. So when you arrive at the poll, you can be like, hey, don't need to talk to you. I already know what I'm doing. And that's really how you cut down a lot of voter intimidation. There is part of that lawsuit by the Trump campaign that people from outside of the voting districts can come in and watch the polls. I hope that is struck down, because we definitely don't want people from other counties that are not as Philadelphia friendly floating around our polls. But then again, if you are prepared, you know what you're doing. We actually have videos on our site about the voting machines themselves. So we have the official city video, and then we have what I call a gap filler. And that's what a lot of what my family votes does, is we fill in the gaps of information. So we kind of look at everybody's site and then we fill in. So if you are equipped with that, voter intimidation is dependent upon you being unsure. The more sure and certain you are, the less anybody can intimidate.
Great, great. Linda had another question. I'm gonna direct this to Lauren. In terms of the drop boxes, do you have insight as to how did they determine where these drop boxes will be located? How does one, I know you could probably go on the website to see where they're listed, but what was done? How do they determine where these drop boxes should be located?
I know that the commissioner's office analyzed the application data. So where there were the most concentrated pockets of applications for vote by mail is where they put the drop boxes, because presuming that would be where people would want to send them back in.
Okay.
But there will be, from everything I've heard right now, every council district will have, if it's allowed to go forward, I don't want to make promises and then have it not be, you absolutely have to check philadelphiavotes.com in the run up to the election, and we'll certainly publicize those locations. But the intent right now is to make sure that they're in at least one, if not more, in every council district.
Okay, great, great. Monica asked, and I direct to both. Oh, Emma.
So I just want to clarify, because I saw something come across the chat. There are no locations listed right now because the lawsuit is holding up everything. So there are no drop boxes listed right now. So.
Right.
Fair point, fair point. I guess that's a fair point when we think about the timing of everything. So if people are starting to get their ballots and we're stressing to vote early, if this lawsuit is still pending, then technically there are no drop boxes. So then I guess, I think that kind of ties into another question that I saw that Monica asked. I guess what happens in that case, right? Like I guess the first question is, will mail-in ballots be sent if the lawsuit is still pending and i.e. drop boxes are not valid? Or I guess maybe they will be sent because you can go to your local post office and mail it out. Is that correct?
Yeah, you can drop it in your neighborhood mailbox. Okay.
So there's a separation between the drop boxes and voting by mail.
Right. That's just another way anybody in the county can drop off their voted ballot in a drop box if you want it to go directly into the hands of the commissioner. So it would be your county election staff is the one that goes around and retrieves the ballots from those drop boxes. Whereas the mail obviously gets processed through the mail and then delivered to your county election officials. But like I said, there's no reason, if you do it early with plenty of time, there is no reason to think that the mail isn't an option, right? Like you should be able to drop your ballot in the mail. Again, I would leave yourself at least a week, if not more.
Emma, I see you want to chime in.
I just want to have one comment because I attend what they call the sunshine meetings where the commissioners talk about the election. And one of the meetings was interrupted by the supervisor of elections, and they were actually talking about ballots that they were thinking of rejecting. And one thing that came up was drop boxes are for your particular county. So if you happen to be at the mall in Montgomery County and you see a drop box, do not put your ballot in that drop box. Okay, so because what will happen is that county will then mail it to Philadelphia, and if it doesn't get in on time, then it's going to at least draw attention to your ballot, and then they'll have to go into the pile of do we accept it or don't we accept it. So only use the drop boxes for your county. So Philadelphia County only if you're in Philly, Montgomery County only, etc.
Great, great. Monica asked, if someone goes to an incorrect polling place, are they still allowed to, can they still vote at that polling place via a provisional ballot?
Yes.
Okay, great, great, great. Let's see if there's other questions. Bruce asks, are organizations allowed to host Dropbox site locations?
I don't want to say definitively. You'd have to work. All the locations will be approved by the commissioners. And then, like I said, there's going to be a bunch of factors that decide where they're going. And because the commissioner staff are the only people who can pick them up, we can't, you know, you're not going to have 2,000 drop boxes in every business and organization that wants to host one necessarily. So that'll be at the commissioner's discretion.
Okay. Another question, if from the chat, if a person voted in the primary by mail, are they what's their expectation as to how do they vote in the general? Are they required to vote by mail again? Do they have the freedom to vote in person? What happens if that person voted by mail in the primary?
If they checked the box that said they wanted to receive mail-in ballots for the rest of the year or be put on that permanent list, then they would receive a ballot automatically. You can check that in that same ballot tracking tool. It'll say that your ballot is pending. That's how, and it'll have the application date, which would likely be the application date you used for the primary. Mine was March 20th, I think.
Mm-hmm.
If you did sign up for that and you want to vote at a polling place instead, I will confirm this, but I believe the new rule is that if it is, you have every single piece and you did not mark it, you can take that back to the polling place and then vote on a machine. That's new.
Actually, because I read the law around this and I did confirm it with the supervisor of elections. You just take the packet back with you as long as you don't mail it.
Right.
That's the main thing. As long as you don't, once you mail it, you voted. So, but you don't mail it, you take it with you to the poll, and then there's a procedure, and they're figuring out the complete procedure, but the law says you surrender your ballot. So you give it to probably the supervisor there at the poll, and you go through a process, and then you sign a document that says, I choose to vote on the machine. I don't want to do this, and you just hand them the packet. So it's actually fairly flexible, you know, like voting by mail is very flexible in the general. You couldn't do that in the spring. So even if you think you may or may not vote by mail, you can apply. And then if you change your mind, then you just take it with you to the poll and just vote on the machine.
Right.
Great. And I think that's important to know. I saw a question Monica asked in terms of if someone made a mistake in their mail-in ballot, are they given an opportunity to make are they notified of that incorrect, of that mistake, and then are they given an opportunity to vote? I think that's where, one, the hope is that no one does make a mistake, but I think that's where it could be tricky in terms of if you sent in your ballot, then that, I guess the consensus is once you send your ballot in the mail, that is your vote. So if you make a mistake, you can't necessarily go to the ballot box and vote again.
And no one's going to notify you that you made the mistake. They're not allowed to start handling those ballots until 7 a.m. on election day, as the law currently stands. So it's not like somebody's going through and seeing that you didn't sign the back, and then they can contact you and say that. They're not even going to look until 7 a.m. on election day.
Great, great, great. Great, great, great. We're continuing to monitor into chat. I believe we captured everything, but feel free. Oh, I see one question here. It was a time where you were able, Darlene asked, there was a time where you were able to vote at a police station when your voter card was not updated at your polling place. Is that still an option? Would you guys happen to know that?
I have never heard of that, but
Yeah, no, you cannot go to a police station. I think that probably changed that rule because there's a lot of intimidation around law enforcement and voting. But no, if there's a problem, that's one thing. If you go to PhiladelphiaVotes.com, there are phone numbers that you can call. You may have to leave a message, but you can call them and leave a message and with your issue. If for people, and particularly in the Black community, there are some people who just don't have access to printers, right? So if you don't have a valid driver's license, you have to print off these applications, and you can call, and it's on our site. You can call the Board of Elections, and they will mail you an application, right? So you're not out of luck if you don't have a printer.
Great, great. So as we close out, I'll give each of you, first I want to say thank you very much. You guys have shared a lot of great insight. Once again, this information will be posted on the Urban League of Philadelphia Facebook page. I imagine the other groups will post it on their page as well. Once we get everything kind of connected, we'll make sure to email everyone the resources so that the resources that were shared here so that you guys can share that out. I guess if you could leave some, Lauren and Emma, if you could give us some closing thoughts as to just now that we're here, we received some great information. What are some things that you would suggest for everyone to do to ensure that their vote will count on November 3rd?
I'll start, Emma, if that's okay. I want everyone to get used to the idea of election week, not election day. It might be days, if not a full week, before we have the results of this election. That does not mean it was rigged or that something is broken or that it was wrong. You're going to hear lots of misinformation and disinformation around that. So it's important to just calibrate your expectations now. And if I do encourage, if anybody has any questions or concerns filling out your ballot, you have answers, please contact the Committee of 70. We respond pretty quickly, and we're happy to help.
Great. Emma?
Okay, so myfamilyvotes.com, we have all the information that I said today is on the site. One thing I would like, because there are a lot of coalition members on here, it would be awesome if groups that are Black community facing are all on the same page, right? So if you go to the Urban League site, My Family Votes, Alpha, it says the same thing. So then people build trust in what's being said. That's a big one. And also, don't panic, have a plan.
Great, great. No, definitely have a plan. That's important. And we definitely share that sentiment in terms of the work of the coalition, being able to, one, be a trusted resource, but then two, to have consistency in messaging, right? Because I think that's one of the challenges right now when we think about misinformation, because there's so much information out there, it's hard to weed through. And then it's hard to trust what's out there. And then I think what ends up happening for a lot of people is rather than continue to dig to find the right information, they disengage. And I think that's the critical part. We want folks to not disengage. We want folks to be able to find that information. And that's why today we were appreciative of having both of you all as panelists today, because you guys both serve as trusted resources with the work that you do both locally on a state level to help individuals understand their power and their vote. So on behalf of the coalition members, on behalf of Latifah Field from the National Coalition of 100 Black Women, Incorporated, the Pennsylvania chapter, Bruce Hill, president of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated Road chapter, we thank you for joining us today for the first in our series of workshops under the Make Black Count Coalition. Once again, if you're an organization, nonpartisan organization that's focused on census and voting in the African-American community, feel free to reach out to me. I can put my email in the chat so that you'll have it. and I can connect you. Once again, the only requirement is that we're looking for organizations that are nonpartisan in nature. We recognize that most of us are all working with nonpartisan organizations, and we want to make sure that we're protecting that 501(c) status. So if you're an organization, as long as you follow that process, we encourage you to reach out to us and to learn more about the work that we do and to join our coalition. Once again, consider reaching out to both My Family Votes and also wevote.70.org. We'll leave this we'll leave this event for a little bit so you can kind of see the chat. I know Lauren put her website on the in the chat, so you can find it there. Emma, if you have a quick minute, if you can add your website there so that folks can refer to it. Thank you once again, everyone, and enjoy the week. Oh, it's a Wednesday. It seems the days are just going all over the place. Enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.